Hi, Hamish Conway here, and welcome to TACOS Tuesday, the place for the best Amazon ads tactics and strategies. And this is episode number 71, and actually the first actual recording that Seb and I are doing this year. And so welcome back, Seb.
Thanks for having me. It's been a long break, but feeling good and ready for a big year for all our brands.
No, it was a very busy end of the year, and Seb had a month off, which was well deserved, to trip around some of Victoria and South Australia, I think, and had a few weeks off myself. And then it is a bit of you come back and it's all go. As much as we wanted to do this last week, but in reality, we were just all go. And one of the things we will all go on is working with clients on their quarterly planning, because often what can happen at the end of the year, everyone's a little bit gassed and everyone's running on fumes and covering basics, right? But then people come back fresh and right, we're going to rip into this year, we're going to get the growth and all of that, which is awesome. And then it's all go at the start of the year, which is great. And we enjoy that. And one of the things that Seb's been really working on is going, okay, how do we bring some real alignment on strategy and clarity and accountability around what are the actual objectives we're going after this quarter? Because quarters are good time to work on. A month can be too short. A year is too long. And if you're setting any targets, it's not just about wishful thinking or hoping we get to that revenue. There's got to be some science and maths behind it. And what Seb has done is we look at what the current state is, and then we look at our controllable factors, and we look at the objectives, and then we work backwards to go, well, this is what would need to be true for this to happen. And then what are the actions we're going to take to make that true? So we're going to share today an example of what our quarterly planning looks like, and then also some of the maths and behind that. This is going to be a two-part episode because there's too much to cover in one go without making it all confusing. And so next week we'll have a part two to this. So as you're listening to this, and what you're going to get out of it is, don't get caught up in the specific details here or looking at the exact maths that we're going to show. Adjusted some things there to make it work. But I just want you to really pay attention to the way of thinking about this. Why I say that is because when you set these goals, and like many of you might be having to go to your leadership team and maybe asking for some more ad budget, for example. So you want to have confidence and understanding, okay, well, this is what we're doing and this is why. That is going to increase the probability of achieving these goals. We all know business has got tons of variables and things we control and weird things, including Amazon. That doesn't always play ball. Oh my God, there's some people have had really tough time with just Amazon listing suppressions at the peak time of the year, for example. So there's a lot of annoying things that happen, but all things equal, like what's going to give you confidence that this plan is actually going to work? Okay. So hopefully that gives it context. And Seb, is there anything else you'd add to that before we dive into having a look at the brand scorecard?
The reason that we created this in the first place, and kind of Hamish touched on it at the start, but we found that a lot of brands we meet with regularly, sometimes what's happening is brands are either overreacting or losing sight of what the long-term goals and objectives are and what long-term goals and success looks like. So we created this piece to, one, stay locked onto what we're trying to achieve long-term, but also to understand and to help communicate what part of what we're doing isn't true or isn't working that's falling down. And that's kind of, in a nutshell, what I just said then is going to be what these two episodes are about.
Yeah.
This one and the next one.
Okay, excellent. So look, if you're just listening to this on Apple or Spotify, you could go back and look at the YouTube version as well. But mostly this is a conversation here where visually it's okay if you're not seeing what we're looking at here. So it's really to listen for the thinking and behind it. Okay, so what we've got here is a quarterly sprint canvas, okay? And we'll expand a few of these things out here. So Seb, tell me, where does the conversation usually start and why does it start there?
Yep, and we had a little bit of conversation about this before we jumped on, but I've never met a brand that doesn't want to grow.
Yeah.
Even if they want to grow profitably, they still want to grow. And even if they're very hell-bent on protecting margin, all that sort of stuff, they still want to grow. And so the conversation really should always start off with is how much do you want to grow by? And so in the first section of the quarterly plan, we start off with what is our target revenue goals? And a great place to start is year on year, because that factors in seasonality. For some circumstances, year-on-year growth is not a good example because maybe the business was very different 12 months ago than what it is now. And so in those cases, you'd use some month-on-month goals, but revenue is where you want to start.
Yeah. Okay. So then you go, okay, so I'm a brand and I, in this example we got here, it's going, hey, the target's 55. So I might be, right, we're doing 40,000 a month currently, and I want it to be at 55. Decent jump in that example. It might not be that aggressive. But then where do you go to there? Are you looking at the target TACOS, or are you looking at target ad spend? Where do you kind of jump to next?
So realistically, once you've kind of done the target revenue, we do jump into a tab next, which is the target calculations. Because to work out your ad spend and things like that, we need to set up some bases. We need to go, okay, what is our base revenue? How much growth is that? What is our base TACOS, or total advertising cost of sale? And then what would it look like or need to look like in order to hit those? So Hamish has brought this up, and maybe for the sake of explaining, let's just close it up and start with one at a time, just to make it easier to plan out. So so what we're looking at here, and just step in, Hamish, if you want to say anything, but what we're basically looking at is, okay, let's assume that a best case scenario, a base case, and a worst case scenario. And we've basically just put in, okay, what would our revenue growth need to be if our revenue base was 40,000 and we wanted to get to 55? And in this case, it was a 38% growth.
Right. Okay.
The next stage is we need to understand what our ad spend base is. And ad spend base in this case was 6,000. And then the total ad spend target, that gets calculated by another field that Hamish will show in a moment, which is what our dependent on what our TACOS is. So in this case, we've got our target base of 15%, which is just our ad spend divided by our revenue, which we went and entered those two before. So we know what that is. We know that to get incremental revenue, it's very unlikely that our TACOS will ever be lower than what it is currently. So at the moment, the TACOS base is 15%. So we can make some assumptions here. Well, we know it's going to be over 15%. We just don't know by how much. So in this case, we're saying, okay, to get that revenue growth, our TACOS base is going to go from 15 to 18%. And that then gives us our total ad spend number of 9,936, which is like, okay, we now know that's what we're going to need to spend if our TACOS ends up being 18%.
And this is, again, with the objective to go, right, we want this 38% growth to get to 55,000 a month from 40. So basically it's saying, well, you are going to have to spend more to achieve that. And that's going to look like your TACOS is going to grow. And why would TACOS grow in this case? Why couldn't
so TACOS would grow basically because ad spend would represent more of your revenue. So when a brand starts out on Amazon, 0 to whatever that number is can happen with very little advertising impact. Advertising comes in normally later in the picture, and you've got to use it to get that exponential growth. And so when you're talking about that, it's always going to represent more of your revenue because at the start it was 0. So it's always going to be a percentage and represent more as your revenue as you're trying to increase and grow.
Great. Okay. So basically here what we're learning in the conversation, again, at the beginning I was talking about alignment, is like, great, to achieve this growth, for a start here, we're looking at ad spend is going to need to increase. How does that go where people go, we can't increase ad spend?
That's perfect actually, because that is the conversation. It's the conversation is a constant conversation of trade-offs. It's like, I want this, but I want this. I can't have this. I want this, and this is why we created as well. We've got to have a conversation of trade-offs. If everything was half my ad spend, double my revenue, double my profit, then there would be no reason for people like me to exist, because it would be too easy. But it's not too easy. So this is the conversation that needs to happen in order to progress forward.
All right. So then let's drill down to these locked assumptions. So explain what you mean by locked assumptions.
Yeah, so just quickly before we get to that bit, I just want to say that we've got these two other sections, which are basically base and worst case scenario. So you'll see in both of those that, let's say that we assume the best case scenario, which is an 18% TACOS, which would then let us get 38% revenue growth, which would hit our target. The other two, the revenue growth stays the same. What we're assuming here is that the efficiency lines. And so in both of the next examples, so the base case, you can see target TACOS goes to 22. That would mean ad spend would need to be, instead of 9,936, it would need to be 12,000. And then the next step over is like, okay, if we're really trying to force things to grow, the new target TACOS would be 26. But basically, we're covering, those different scenarios that could happen.
Okay. Good. So then, it's really giving people that understanding of, okay, for the growth, there is going to be some trade-offs that you've got to make, i.e. increasing ad spend. And then I guess in this next part here, we look at some of these assumptions. The more accurate the assumptions, the closer it's going to be to best case, or if there's factors that kick in, and, then it could be more of a worst case. But do you want to explain the locked assumptions? What is that? What do you mean by that? And what are the locked assumptions there that you can impact?
Yeah, so locked assumptions are just some things to help calculate this accurately. We kind of have to assume. They are assumptions by nature because they're not things that we know. We only have historical evidence of them. And so that's what they are. So some of the ones here, for those that are listening, is average selling price, or ASP. That one typically is pretty easy to lock away. That doesn't change heaps. And so you can kind of lock that one away and be pretty confident with that. But it also could help you calculate, well, what happens if I doubled my ASP? What would happen, right? And that can help you understand that you actually need to acquire a lot less traffic if you doubled your ASP, as an example. But in general, ASP is going to stay relatively
I mean, the way that could change, I guess, is you put more attention on higher price products. Potentially would be there,
or you create a 2-pack of a single
variation.
Yeah. So then, and I mean, that's going to influence your ASP. It's probably not going to double it, but it's going to, it's going to bring it up. Absolutely.
Okay.
So you could muck around with those numbers to see what that would do.
Okay. So the
next metric is non-brand revenue. So this one's important to understand because this basically helps us understand how strong your brand is. Remembering that advertising in general has the biggest influence on unbranded customers. Branded customers are customers that we're capturing demand, but we're not really creating it. And there's a high probability they would have purchased from us anyway without the ad.
Yeah.
So because of that, we want to focus on the unbranded component of it. And so this metric's really trying to understand, okay, well, how much of your revenue currently comes from unbranded versus branded? Yes. So we can kind of get a gauge on, if this was at 10%, for example, we're going to have very little influence on the brand because 90% of the revenue comes from branded, which is the least amount of impact we have.
Yeah. Okay. So non-branded, that's where the incremental growth is really going to come from, unless there's a whole lot of off-Amazon activity happening around brand. Right. That's going to, that will be driving more branded search.
Which in reality, we don't have much control of anyway. Like that's just going to flow through to the brand kind of regardless of what we do on the ads component side.
Okay. And then the next part.
Next part is ad clicks of overall traffic. This is just understanding how much of the advertising represents of your overall traffic. So this is just getting an understanding similar to the non-brand revenue. We just want to know how much traffic is coming from ads versus what's coming organically. It's similar in the sense that it tells us how strong the brand is, how strong organically the brand is as well, to help us understand that part.
Okay. And then target non-branded conversion rate. Talk about that.
Yep. So target non-branded conversion rate. This was a really important one. This one here is the one that would probably change the most when you're trying to scale. So target non-brand conversion rate. So the reason we use it is because if we include your brand name in it, your brand name is going to convert very, very highly, which will throw the conversion rate out significantly. Yeah. It'll overstate the conversion rate. It also helps us with diagnostics, and we're going to cover diagnostics in the next episode. But this helps us kind of identify where our issues are if we're not hitting our target revenue goals and our efficiency goals.
Okay, good. And so, I mean, a lot of these locked assumptions here, particularly for brands that have already on Amazon and been operating, like there is a starting point there and trends you can look at that can make these assumptions pretty accurate. Right, as a starting point.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you would have all of those metrics if you've been selling for any kind of time on Amazon. You'd have them.
So in some ways here, you've got the metrics that you know, your ASP, non-brand revenue, ad clicks off, overall traffic, target non-brand conversion rate, and total conversion rate. So you got those starting point numbers there. So then this next part, you're basically using the status quo to a degree to then compute, okay, well, what are the metrics need to actually happen? Do you want me to have a look at the core calculations or just jump to metrics?
I think we jump just to the weekly for now. We can probably go back to core if we want to do it. But yeah, so from here, basically what we've done up till this point is basically establish, like what's the status quo, and then what would that translate into every week, what we need to hit. So even though we are at a quarterly planning session here, we don't want to arrive at end of month one being like, oh crap, we didn't hit our first month and now we've got to scramble for the next 2 months to try and hit our quarterly goal. So we still want to be able to put a number behind these objectives so that we can adjust and pivot as we need and check our assumptions. So we might do this and go, okay, some of our assumptions are way off. They're not going to be right. And this again has that conversation off about trade-offs that we want to make.
Yeah. So for example, if you're going to increase your ad spend from $6,000 to nearly $10,000 and putting a lot more ad traffic, there is a high probability your conversion rate could actually go down.
There is, which would be more like the base scenario as an example, or the worst scenario. You can see in those two scenarios, your target non-brand conversion rate goes from 13.4 to the lowest version, which is 10.7. That would be the worst case scenario where you've really dropped. And even though that doesn't look like much, 13.4 to 10.7 as a percentage, that's significant. It's going to be like
say back of the envelope 30%, 25-30% difference. Yeah. So okay. And then this breaking it down weekly, this starts to get to the point where, okay, so we've got these assumptions here, and this is what would have to be true weekly for us to be on track to grow the revenue, the growth revenue goal of 55,000. Okay, so and say right, the target CPC is going to be this 1.8. We would, and still 50.8% of ad clicks for overall traffic would need to have 1,907 a week of targeted ad clicks, and organic sessions would match that, and then target ad spend. So if those things being true, we were investing $2,244 a week. That would be generating $12,465 in total revenue for the week, which has us on track for the month.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So
there's some numbers there. Ultimately, it's like, okay, now I know what my numbers need to be. Next week, we'll cover off on if those assumptions aren't true, how this also helps you diagnose where you would go and spend time.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Okay. So, and going back to then the quarterly plan, and if you're not looking at this, it's kind of like a plan on a page, right? So we've got our target revenue, January, February, March, target TACOS, January, February, March, and target ad spend, January, February, March. Then we've also got, what is our focus for this quarter and what's the biggest blocker? So tell me about these two aspects here of the quarterly plan.
There'll be certain times when you're not sure what your decision should be. And when those circumstances come up, you need a more overall guiding plan on where you're trying to go as a brand.
Yeah.
And that's what these are created for. So the theme or the rallying cry in this example is, if we use this example, is revenue growth. If we get to a point where we're 50-50 between a decision, our decision is going to be influenced by what the theme is. And in this case, it's revenue growth. So if we're not sure if we should go harder and drive more and push harder, and we're 50-50 whether that should happen, we're going to do it in this case because revenue growth is the primary theme and growth for the brand.
Okay. Good. So then,
the
brand and us, we're aligned on.
Yeah.
This is what we're focused on. This is what we agreed to. So let's hold that path.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And that stops you from overreacting to monthly pieces as well. Even though we're going to be looking at the monthly anyway and breaking it down, it'll stop us from it's like, this is what the plan is.
Yeah. Okay. And then talk about the primary constraint. Like, there's always constraints in business to operate within. So explain that.
So this one could change even over a quarter, but the primary constraint is going to be, at the beginning, it'll be what we think potentially will stop us from hitting those targets we've set up. But it could evolve, and basically it's going to be that number one thing that we want to focus on to either address or fix to be able to hit it. But it's going to be the primary thing that stops us from hitting our goal.
Okay, good. And actually, in some cases, that could also be like stock outages as well. Or,
Absolutely,
it could be a range of things there, or suppressed listing, or Amazon negotiations causing suppressed listings, for example. So then we've got what are the fundamental metrics that will drive our company-wide goals? And so in this example here, you've got advertising conversion strategic pillar. I'll let you explain these here, what you've got.
Yep. So we've got ad conversion rate pillar, ad click-through rate pillar, and then traffic pillar. And, I kind of expressed to Hamish that I think that the two main pillars are your traffic and conversion, only because they influence so many other things. Click-through rate, can be important and is important, and you can do stuff to optimize it, but it's not as important as the other two, traffic and conversion rate.
Okay. Excellent. Actually, on there, I just want to jump back to this target calculations one, because we're talking about what can you control. And, so we're going here, well, if we're getting these target ad clicks, then we're well on the way. But then what is it that impacts the number of target ad clicks?
Yeah, so that would be the CPC.
Yeah, the CPC, but then also bids, right? Yeah, so what your CPC bid is. Correct.
Yeah, so bids are not actually a data point. Bids are they're a status.
Yes.
So CPC is actually the data, because I could put my bid at $20 bid.
Yeah.
But it's a second place auction, so I might only pay $9.
Yeah.
Even though my bid is set at 20. So that's why we look at CPC rather than bid, because bid is a status, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's what we're going to pay. The CPC is the part that we actually are going to pay.
But more my point was like how you go about controlling bids. Bid management is a key driver of your
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's probably it is the number one thing that you can do to improve your results. More than advanced day parting strategies, bidding is going to give you way better return on time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Good. So just jumping back then, we've got North Star metrics that was taking from the conversion non-brand, conversion per click non-brand, and then traffic sessions. So like each quarter this will change, but it will be like, okay, what's the key metric? What is it actually now? What's the target? And then what is the gap? So anything else to explain on that, and how do you think through deciding what the North Star metrics are going to be?
Yeah, here you can see that we've put kind of conversion and traffic. Those are the two, and then I've kind of put we've put like a hyphen, and then what the metric is. They both fit. That's kind of essentially saying there's those two buckets. You got the conversion and the traffic piece. Again, you could add click-through rate here too. And then we're basically just saying, from an advertising point of view, what are the two things that control the North Star piece? So for conversion, we want to track conversion rate on non-brand. That's important, but that's actually not what controls. Like measuring conversion rate isn't what controls it.
Yeah.
The CPC on the advertising side is what controls it, and the type of targeting that you're going after, right? Like as in, if you're going after top of funnel stuff, like targeting is important as well. Like what type of targeting that you're going after. But if you have a good system, you should always be aligning your bids, which again CPC, with your targeting as well. Like your top of funnel keywords are going to have a lower bid because the traffic doesn't convert as well on that. Versus your middle of funnel versus your bottom of funnel type terms.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. So I'm conscious of the time there. And then obviously this other part here that we have on the one-page plan is what is the initiative around, revenue, conversion, due date, status, owner, priority, pillar that relates to above. And so then there's clarity on, who's doing what and what's happening in that priority. So yeah, the overarching thing here is like to go, right, everyone's on the same page. This is the mission. These are the metrics. And then what we'll cover off next time is looking at the decision matrix in terms of if some of these measures are off track. Well, how do we decide what should be done? And linked to that then is we've got a weekly brand scorecard that is has metrics of things on track, off track, or in between or behind, but with clear actions. So we'll dive into more detail on that next time around. And there we go. So I think hopefully that was useful just to, I mean, even if you took away from this here, it's like, okay, we've got to change our time horizon on plans. Second, we've got to get clear on, well, what is our current status here? If we want to grow, what is that actually going to mean in reality? It might, in terms of additional ad spend, for example, or if we can't do additional ad spend because that's a constraint, what are the other levers we've got? Okay, we're really going to have to go hard on conversion rate there in terms of maybe our content or the type of traffic we're doing. But usually with growth, and if you think back to some of our other podcasts that we've done there, and even the presentation Seb did at the Amazon Ads Conference last year, is like every campaign has a job and on how to set objectives the right way. Are you after ranking, growth, profit? What is it? And your campaigns match up to that. So look, in some cases you can hold those constraints and just keep on finding more and more traffic. And in America, for example, there can be very deep demand. In Australia, in some pockets there, it's not so deep. So you've got to go more broad. Anyway, hopefully that all is starting to get you thinking, getting you ready to change the way you view things with your planning. And look, and if you would like to have a conversation with Seb about your results from last year or even from the last quarter and get clear on what should you be doing for your brand to get the growth that you're after, then connect with us on gosellglobal.com/services or go to the services drop down on the page and then you can book a call, or there is a book a call button on the page there that you can then end up connecting with Seb. There's also a management for Amazon ads page there, so you can get that. And he can have a look at what you're doing. And this is a free consultation there, something very worthwhile to do. So thanks so much for tuning in. Appreciate you. And come back next week for the part 2 on the setting quarterly objectives.